To make the biggest pumpkin, we need the biggest loom. So it's not going to be a 31 peg loom, 12 peg loom, or wait, what is that? I'm using the 41 peg loom and 24 peg loom for this tutorial. Okay, for yarn, I'm using orange obviously, and then a tan color for the stem. This is Red Heart Super Saver, and it's a number 4 medium weight yarn. You can use chunky if you want to. Then I'm using this gigantic crochet hook, a looming hook, measuring tape, yarn needle, and scissors. Then you're going to need some stuffing. Now originally for this project, I found yarn cuttings, I guess you can call them. Not really sure what to call them at this point, but it's a giant bag of all of this yarn that I saved from old projects. You can actually use it to stuff your projects as seen in one of my videos, but for this project it was a little see-through, so I decided to go with regular. Whip out your 41 peg loom first and your orange yarn, and we're going to start off by pulling out a little bit of tail and doing a drawstring cast on, doing a slip knot, and then attaching it to your anchor peg. You can do a knot too. Then we're going to do our drawstring cast on, which is when we go in between the first and last peg. Then we zigzag between all of the other pegs left to right. And you just keep zigzagging between all of them until you get to the last peg. And then when you do, you're going to just lay your yarn over the tops of all of the pegs until you get to the very beginning of your loom. You're going to notice one empty peg. That's okay, ignore it, and lift the bottom loop of the last peg that you laid over, and then go backwards, lifting every other loop that has 2 loops over the top loops. When you get to the beginning again, then you're going to lay your yarn over that last peg as if it doesn't even exist, and we're going to go ahead doing the U-wrap knit stitch. The U-wrap is when you just half wrap the first peg and lift the bottom loop over it as you brace it against the peg, and then you move on to the next one doing the exact same thing. If you look at the loom from the top, you'll notice that you're creating a backwards U. That's where it gets its name. The U-wrap stitch is super tight, so it's not going to show too much of the inside of the pumpkin. Even though this is a really time-consuming stitch to do, I do like it when it comes to these kind of projects because it's close knit and you're using such a small, thin strand of yarn. This is a very time-consuming stitch. It took me a few hours to get this all completed. So make sure that you set aside enough time to do that because it is time-consuming. In total for this project, I knitted about 8 inches of the U-wrap knit stitch, and by that time I had a pretty stretchy panel to work with. You can go even longer if you want to make a tall pumpkin. My pumpkin was fairly medium sized, it was sort of tall, but if you wanted to make a super squat pumpkin, then you could just do less rows. I'd say about 2 or 3 inches less than I did, and then it will be time to bind off once you've hit that point. I worked on this project off and on through schoolwork and all that as well. I watched videos while I was knitting. It's actually really nice because you can get 2 things done. I have some really boring seminars I have to listen to, and so it's really nice to actually just knit and still be able to take in the information. Ozzy was downstairs for most of the portion where I was knitting behind the scenes, and he was just being cute, playing with his mouse. He was causing a lot of problems though, trying to get my ball of yarn. Same old story that he does during most of the videos. But in this video, as far as the tutorial goes, he wasn't in it for a reason, because he's very distracting and it's hard for me to film. So make sure you get all cozy, really enjoy the weather if you can. I know it's really sloppy and gross, but it's nice to sit on the couch and actually knit and all of that. And if you are part of school online like I am, it's really nice to just sit back and be able to do something like this, but still be able to take in information as long as you're not having to multitask with notes and stuff like that. Next, we're working on the bind off, which is the last part of this project, and I'm just doing a drawstring cast off circularly. You do this by pulling out a little bit of slack yarn and taking your yarn and laying it over all of the pegs on your loom until you get to the first peg on your loom again. And then you'll pull out a little bit of extra yarn for sewing, and then you'll snip that with your scissors. And we're going to go down into the first peg's loop as if we were purling, but we're actually pulling all of that yarn through and securing it. And you'll go to the next peg and do the same thing. Take that loop and just pull it all the way through. It's pretty self-explanatory and easy to do, so you're just going to do this all the way around your loom until you get to the last peg. When you're at your last peg, you're just going to start popping off all of the loops from the last loop to the first loop. This is just securing it as you go. And then once everything is off of your loom, you will leave the drawstring completely alone because we're actually going to pull the very first drawstring cast on that we had done with this project completely shut. Now get your yarn needle and we're going to turn the project inside out and start sewing closed the bottom of the pumpkin. And I, again, have never had a particular way of sewing things up. I just randomly sew things and then I make a couple knots to secure it and then weave it into the fabric a little bit. And then you're going to start stuffing. I'm using my normal polyfill, and stuffing really just depends on how you want to do it. I usually grab small clumps and get the corners and crevices and start shaping it from the outside, and then I add the filler, and I keep stuffing until the stitches kind of start to stretch and you sort of see the stuffing. You don't want to stuff too much or it'll just strain the entire project. And then once you're done stuffing, you're just going to close the top and sew it up, and you will be completely done with your pumpkin. So our pumpkin is completely done except for the stem. So the next part of this project will be making the stem. For the stem, I don't have a lot of footage that I put together for how to make it because it's pretty self-explanatory. But the funny thing with it is that it works the same exact way as the pumpkin itself does. You're going to use the 24 peg loom though instead of the big loom. Unless you want to make a giant stem, you're going to take your hand yarn and do a drawstring cast on circularly just like we did with the pumpkin. Then you would do your normal U-wrap knit stitch all the way around until you have the desired length that you want. I roughly did about 3 or 4 inches of this, and then I also stretched out the fabric at the end to make it a little bit longer. And then you'll just sew everything up along the bottom and the top. You can stuff it if you want to, but I left it unstuffed because it gives it a little bit more shape if it's not stuffed, so I left it alone. Then attached it to the top of my pumpkin by just sewing it on. So I don't really have a particular way in how I do it. Your pumpkin is completely done. This pumpkin is not going to look like the pumpkins I did before, the mini ones. In fact, I found that with lighter weight yarn, it was impossible for me to escape holes when I did the purl stitch. So if you're using the same exact weight of yarn that I am, you're going to get more of a plushy kind of pumpkin than you are a realistic pumpkin. If you're going for a realistic pumpkin, then all you have to change up is the weight of your yarn. You can use a bulky 6 yarn or a 5. Follow my last tutorial that I have, it'll be linked in the description, and you just follow the exact same tutorial I did before, but you're using it on a 41 peg loom. And the only minor change that you'll have to make is the fact that the 41 peg loom is not even like the 12 peg loom is. Thank you so much for watching this video. It was a lot of fun to put together, and I hope that you all have an amazing Halloween season and fall season. I'm super excited. So make tons of pumpkins, give them away to your friends or family. It's so much fun. Until next week, guys, Rayalite Knits out.